My husband whispered one sentence in the dark that changed the way I saw my family forever. Tell them we're bankrupt. Not struggling. Not downsizing. Bankrupt. And 11 days later, my mother rented out my childhood bedroom to strangers before she even asked if I was okay. My name is Claire. I'm 34 years old. And this is the story of how losing money showed me I had never actually belonged to my family at all. The strange thing is, nothing exploded at first. No screaming. No betrayal. No dramatic fight at the dinner table. Just silence. The kind that quietly removes you from people's priorities. The kind that teaches you your value had a price tag attached to it the whole time. I used to think my family loved me because I was dependable, responsible, successful, useful. I didn't realize those words were all the same thing to them until I stopped being useful. It started on a Thursday evening. Rain tapped softly against the kitchen windows while I reviewed blueprints at the counter. I'm an architect, or at least I was at the time. My husband Ethan sat at the table staring at his laptop like it had personally offended him. Cold coffee sat untouched beside him. The clock on the microwave read 10:43 p.m. Neither of us had eaten dinner. That should have warned me something was wrong. Ethan closed the laptop slowly. Too slowly. Like someone preparing for impact. We need to talk. Every married person knows those 4 words have weight. I put my pencil down carefully. What happened? He rubbed his hands together. The investors backed out. I blinked. What do you mean backed out? The whole thing collapsed this afternoon. The room suddenly felt colder. Ethan had spent 2 years building a logistics software company with 2 friends from graduate school. Every savings account we had touched that company. Our vacations disappeared into it. Our weekends disappeared into it. Most of our marriage disappeared into it. But you said the acquisition was almost finalized. It was. His voice cracked slightly. Until it wasn't. I sat across from him slowly. How bad is it? Ethan laughed once. Not happily. That depends. On what? On whether we're honest with your family. I stared at him. What does that mean? He leaned forward. Claire, your family treats relationships like investments. That's not true. He gave me a tired look. Your mother asks people what they earn before she asks if they're happy. She's practical. Your sister only calls when she needs design advice or money. That's unfair. And your father hasn't made a decision in 20 years without your mother approving the budget first. I crossed my arms. You're upset. I'm observant. Silence filled the kitchen. Rain hit the glass harder. Then Ethan said the sentence that stayed inside my head for months. Tell them we're bankrupt. I frowned immediately. We're not bankrupt. Not legally. That's lying. No, he said quietly. It's testing. I hated the calmness in his voice. Testing what? Whether your family knows how to love someone who has nothing to offer. I stood up. That's ridiculous. Is it? Yes. Then prove me wrong. I walked to the sink. My reflection looked pale in the dark window. Ethan continued carefully. We're in trouble, Claire. How much trouble? We'll lose the condo. My chest tightened. The savings? Gone. I swallowed hard. The retirement account? He nodded once. I gripped the counter so hard my fingers hurt. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Everything we built, everything planned, gone in one conversation. Then came the part that hurt more. Not the money, the fear. Because deep down, a tiny part of me already wondered if Ethan was right. I grew up in a beautiful house with expensive furniture nobody could touch. My mother called it maintaining standards. My father called it keeping peace. My sister Vanessa called it normal. I called it home. At least back then. Mom organized our family like a company. Schedules. Expectations. Performance. Efficiency. Even affection had timing. Praise arrived when achievements did. Love appeared strongest during success. When I got into architecture school, Mom cried harder than she did at my wedding. Because success mattered more than happiness in our house. I didn't notice it growing up. Fish don't notice water. I was the reliable daughter. The stable one. The helper. Vanessa was the emotional one, the dramatic one, the beautiful one. Mom spent years fixing Vanessa's crises while quietly assigning responsibilities to me. I paid bills when Dad forgot. I reviewed contracts. I designed Vanessa's bakery logo for free. I lent money nobody repaid. And somehow, I felt proud of it. Useful people get attention. Useful people get invited. Useful people matter. At least that's what I believed. Until 11 days changed everything. The next morning, I called my mother. She answered on the third ring. Claire, make this quick. I'm at Pilates. I need to tell you something. A pause. You sound tired. Ethan's company collapsed. Silence. Then immediate calculation. How much did you lose? Not are you okay? Not what happened. Just numbers. Most of it. How much is most? I closed my eyes. We may lose the condo. Another silence. Longer this time. I could practically hear spreadsheets forming in her brain. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate. Like bad weather. Like delayed luggage. Not life-changing devastation. I waited for warmth. It didn't come. Then she asked quietly, did Ethan sign personal guarantees? Yes. That was irresponsible. Something inside me shrank. I know. What's your plan? I don't know yet. Well, she said briskly, don't panic publicly. I frowned. What? People smell desperation, Claire. I almost laughed from disbelief. My marriage was cracking under financial collapse, and my mother was worried about optics. Then she added, don't tell Vanessa yet. Why not? She's finalizing wedding seating charts. I stared at the wall. Mom lowered her voice. She doesn't need stress right now. Stress. As if my existence had suddenly become an inconvenience. We're family, I said weakly. Yes, Mom replied immediately. Which is why we handle problems strategically. Strategically. That word echoed after the call ended. Not emotionally. Not compassionately. Strategically. Ethan looked up from the couch when I walked back in. Well, I sat beside him slowly. She asked how much money we lost before asking if I was okay. He didn't say, I told you so, which somehow hurt more. Day 2 felt stranger. Vanessa finally called. I almost hoped Mom had warned her gently. That hope lasted 12 seconds. Oh my God, Vanessa said immediately. Mom told me Ethan destroyed your finances. Destroyed. Interesting choice of word. He didn't destroy anything. Well, somebody did. I rubbed my forehead. Vanessa. Claire, I'm literally 3 weeks from the wedding. There it was again. Not concern. Scheduling. Inconvenience. I know. I just need to understand if you can still contribute. I froze. What? The wedding gift. I actually thought I misheard her. You're asking about the wedding gift. It's already budgeted. I laughed softly. Not because it was funny. Because my brain couldn't process the conversation. Vanessa sounded annoyed now. Why are you acting weird? Because my life is collapsing. And mine can collapse too if vendors aren't paid. There was no cruelty in her voice. That's what terrified me. Cruelty would have meant emotion. This was just administration. Like HR discussing layoffs. I'll let you know, I whispered. Well, please do it soon. Then she added the sentence that stayed with me for weeks. Mom says emotional decisions ruin families. After the call, I sat silently on the bedroom floor for almost an hour. Ethan found me there eventually. She asked about the wedding gift, I said. He nodded slowly like he expected it. And somehow, that made me angry. You think you understand my family. I think I understand systems. They're not a system. Aren't they? I looked away, because suddenly I wasn't sure anymore. Day 3 brought my father. Or, technically, a voicemail. Hey, sweetheart. Your mother told me things are difficult. Just stay calm. Everything works out eventually. That was it. 32 seconds. No follow-up. No offer to help. No invitation home. Nothing. Dad used to build birdhouses with me when I was little. He taught me how to sand wood smoothly. how to measure twice, how to repair things instead of replacing them. But somewhere over the years, Mom became the operating system and Dad became background software. Gentle, passive, disconnected. I called him back twice. No answer. Later I learned Mom had told him to give me space. Space. Another efficient word. Day 4 was the first public humiliation. Mom hosted Sunday dinner every week. Mandatory attendance. No exceptions unless hospitalized. We arrived exactly at 6. Vanessa opened the door. Her smile looked rehearsed. Oh, good, you made it. Made it. Like attendance itself was uncertain now. The dining room smelled like rosemary chicken. Crystal glasses reflected warm light. Everything looked normal. That was the unsettling part. Mom hugged Ethan briefly. A professional hug. 2 seconds maximum. Then she pulled me aside near the kitchen. Don't discuss finances during dinner. I stared at her. You invited us. Yes, and I'd like a pleasant evening. Pleasant. My chest felt tight again. Dinner proceeded like a corporate meeting pretending layoffs weren't happening upstairs. Vanessa discussed floral arrangements. Mom discussed property taxes. Dad discussed weather patterns. Nobody asked how we were surviving. At one point, Ethan reached for more wine. Mom noticed instantly. Careful, she said lightly. We all need discipline during difficult periods. The table went quiet. I saw Ethan's jaw tighten. Something hot flashed through me. Are you serious right now? Mom blinked calmly. What? You think he's drinking irresponsibly because his company failed? I think stress creates poor habits. Vanessa jumped in immediately. Claire, don't start. Don't start. As though reacting to humiliation was the real problem. Dad kept eating silently. I looked at him desperately. He wouldn't meet my eyes. That hurt worst of all. After dessert, Mom handed Vanessa an envelope. For the honeymoon deposit. $5,000. Right in front of us. Not hidden. Not private. Intentional. Vanessa smiled brightly. Thanks, Mom. Then Mom looked at me with perfect composure. I wish timing were different for everyone. I finally understood something horrifying. My family didn't believe support should flow toward need. They believed support should flow toward return. Vanessa's wedding was still considered a valuable investment. Me? I had become unstable stock. That night, Ethan drove silently. Streetlights passed across his face. Finally, he asked softly, Do you still think I'm wrong? I looked out the window. No. And admitting that felt like grieving a death nobody else could see. Day 5 arrived with practical consequences. My mother texted me at 7:12 a.m. Not to check on me. To ask for the Netflix password. We shared family accounts for years. Suddenly, she wanted financial separation. That exact phrase. I stared at the message until Ethan laughed bitterly beside me. She's off-boarding you. What? That's what companies do when someone becomes a liability. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't, because deep down, I saw it too. Every interaction suddenly felt procedural, measured, managed, cold. Later that afternoon, I received another text from Vanessa. Hey. Mom thinks it may be best if you skip bridal brunch photos. No pressure. Just avoiding questions from people. Avoiding questions. Translation? Avoiding embarrassment. I typed 3 different responses before deleting all of them. Finally, I wrote, Okay. That one word shattered something inside me more than any argument could. Because I realized I was cooperating in my own removal. Like an employee quietly packing a desk. That evening, Ethan cooked pasta, while I sat at the counter staring into nothing. You don't have to keep proving them right, he said gently. What does that mean? You keep accepting treatment you'd never allow from strangers. I laughed weakly. They're my family, are they? The question sat heavily between us. I hated it because I didn't know the answer anymore. On day 6, my mother called unexpectedly cheerful. Good news, she announced. I almost felt hopeful. Then she continued. I found a way to help you become more financially responsible. Every word made me more nervous. How? Well, she said carefully, I listed your old bedroom on Airbnb. I blinked. What? You haven't lived here in years. That's still my room. It's in used capacity. And used capacity. I felt physically sick. The room still had my books. My college sketches. The window seat Dad built. Photos. Letters. Childhood. Mom continued explaining like a consultant presenting quarterly improvements. The extra income offsets increasing costs. You rented out my childhood bedroom? You're being emotional. I actually laughed. Sharp. Disbelieving. Emotional. Claire, sentimentality doesn't pay property taxes. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then quietly I asked, did you even think to ask me first? You don't own the house. There it was. Clean. Efficient. Legally correct. Emotionally devastating. I hung up without another word. Then I cried harder than I had since the company collapsed. Not because of the room. Because I finally understood. Nothing in my family belonged to you unless you were currently generating value from it. Not space. Not love. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and considered silence an acceptable operational delay. That was the thing about my family. Nothing was emotional unless it affected efficiency. On day 7, Ethan found me sitting on the living room floor surrounded by old photo albums. I had driven to a storage unit that morning. Somehow I already knew my childhood things would disappear next. I was right. Mom had boxed everything without telling me. Neatly labeled. Categorized. Archived. Like closed accounts. Ethan sat beside me quietly. I held up a photograph from my 8th birthday. Dad stood behind me helping me hold a cake. Mom smiled at the camera with perfect posture. Vanessa wore a princess crown and looked annoyed. She wasn't the center of attention. We looked happy, I whispered. Ethan studied the photo. You probably were. Then what happened? He answered gently. You grew into a role instead of a relationship. I looked at him. What does that mean? You became the capable one. I leaned back against the couch slowly. The helper. The fixer. The stable department. That word again. Department. I hated how accurate it felt. Ethan pointed toward the photo. Did your family celebrate you when you needed something? I opened my mouth, then closed it, because suddenly, I couldn't remember. Graduation. Job promotions. But need? Pain? Weakness? No. Those moments were usually redirected, managed, minimized. Mom believed problems should be solved quickly and privately. Feelings slowed productivity. Dad adapted by becoming quiet. Vanessa adapted by becoming dependent. And me? I adapted by becoming useful. That night, I finally asked Ethan something I'd avoided for days. Why did you want me to tell them we were bankrupt? He took a long breath. Because I knew you wouldn't believe me otherwise. Believe what? That your family only feels safe loving people they can organize. The sentence hit harder than I expected. I stared at the photo album in my lap. You really think they don't love me? I think they love the function you serve. I hated how calm he sounded. Not angry. Not smug. Just honest. And honesty can feel cruel when it arrives before you're ready. Day 8 was Vanessa's bridal brunch. I wasn't invited. Officially, it was because space became limited. Unofficially, Mom decided struggling relatives disrupted aesthetics. I learned this from my cousin Melanie. She called while I was grocery shopping. Wait, she said, confused. You're not here? No. But your mom said you chose not to come. I stopped pushing the cart. She said that. Yeah. She told everyone you needed privacy because of financial embarrassment. Embarrassment. Interesting. Not grief. Not stress. Not crisis. Embarrassment. As though losing stability made me socially contagious. I thanked Melanie and hung up. Then I stood frozen beside canned soup for almost a full minute. An older woman nearby glanced at me with concern. Sweetheart, are you all right? 3 seconds. That's all it took for a stranger to show more warmth than my family had shown in 8 days. And suddenly I realized something devastating. The emotional starvation in my family felt normal to me because I had grown up inside it. That evening I didn't cry. For the first time, I felt angry instead. Real anger. Not hurt. Not disappointment. Clarity. I went home and opened every financial record I had connected to my family. Every loan. Every unpaid, temporary, transfer. Every vendor recommendation. Every free consultation. Every emergency rescue. I made spreadsheets. Architects love structure. So I built one. By midnight, I had calculated something astonishing. Over 12 years, I had quietly given my family nearly $87,000. Not including unpaid labor. Not including professional work. Not including emotional management. $87,000. And somehow I was now considered dead weight after 11 difficult days. I laughed out loud at the absurdity. Ethan walked into the room carefully. You okay? I turned the laptop toward him. I was never their daughter. He frowned slightly. What? I was infrastructure. The room went silent. Then Ethan sat beside me slowly. And for the first time in days, I stopped feeling crazy. Day 9 brought the final fracture. Dad called unexpectedly around noon. I answered immediately. Dad. His voice sounded nervous. Hey, sweetheart. For one hopeful second, I thought maybe he missed me. Maybe he finally wanted to talk. Then he cleared his throat. Your mother asked me to discuss something. Of course she did. I closed my eyes. What is it? Well, he said carefully, the family lake house. I already knew. I just didn't know how bad it would feel. We may need to adjust summer access this year. I laughed once. Adjust? With the financial uncertainty and everything. Just say it. Restricted access sounds better? And there it was. The answer. My father had spent decades surviving my mother by surrendering decisions one piece at a time. Until eventually he no longer made any. I suddenly saw him clearly. Not cruel. Just absent. Emotionally outsourced. Dad, I asked softly, when was the last time you called me without Mom asking you to? He didn't answer. Because he couldn't remember either. My throat tightened. I love you, I whispered. I love you too. But even that sounded procedural now. After we hung up, Ethan found me standing in the kitchen staring at nothing. What happened? He leaned against the doorway quietly. Then he asked the question that changed everything. What would happen if you stopped participating? I frowned. What do you mean? No fixing. No explaining. No chasing. No volunteering. No proving. I crossed my arms. They'd think I'm selfish. They already treat you like an expense. That landed hard. Because it was true. And the second my output dropped, the contract changed. That night, I made a decision. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just structural. I stopped initiating contact. No calls. No apologizing. No rescuing conversations. Nothing. Day 10 passed quietly. No one checked on me. Mom posted brunch photos online with captions about family blessings. Dad shared an article about interest rates. Nobody noticed my absence. Or maybe they noticed and assumed I'd return automatically. Like electricity. Like internet service. Useful systems always come back eventually. Right? Wrong. On day 11, everything changed. I woke at 6:17 a.m. to 17 missed calls. All from Vanessa. I stared at the phone in confusion. Then it rang again. I answered immediately. What happened? Vanessa sounded panicked. Mom collapsed. Every emotion inside me activated instantly. Fear overrides anger. What? She fainted during a meeting. Is she okay? She's at St. Mary's. I was already grabbing my shoes. Ethan stood up immediately. What happened? Mom's in the hospital. We drove in complete silence. The city blurred outside the windows. Despite everything, she was still my mother. And part of me still wanted her approval. That realization hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. When we arrived, Vanessa paced the waiting room in wrinkled silk pajamas. Dad sat frozen beside a coffee machine looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Vanessa rushed toward me. Oh, thank God you came. Interesting. Not embarrassed now. Not inconvenient now. Needed now. I hugged Dad first. His eyes looked exhausted. What happened? Stress, he whispered. Apparently her blood pressure spiked. I looked toward the hallway. Then something strange happened. No one spoke. No one organized. No one took control. The system was down. And suddenly the entire family looked confused without Mom directing traffic. A nurse approached holding a clipboard. Who handles insurance authorizations? Dad blinked helplessly. Vanessa looked at me automatically. There it was. Reflex. They still expected me to solve things. The old Claire would have stepped forward instantly. Calm. Efficient. Useful. Instead I asked, has anyone called the insurance provider? Silence. Vanessa frowned. You always do that stuff. I nodded slowly. Yes. The nurse waited politely. Dad looked overwhelmed. Vanessa looked irritated. And for the first time in my life, I didn't rescue them immediately. Not to punish them. Not for revenge. Because I finally understood something important. If I continued functioning as unpaid emotional infrastructure, nothing would ever change. So I handed Dad the clipboard gently. The policy number should be in Mom's wallet. He stared at me uncertainly. I don't know how this works. You can ask the nurse. Vanessa looked shocked. Claire, seriously? I turned toward her slowly. Yes. Seriously. Something in my voice made her step back. Not anger. Boundaries. New walls. Solid ones. Mom regained consciousness 3 hours later. Minor cardiac episode. Stress-induced exhaustion. Nothing fatal. But the doctor gave strict instructions. No work. No pressure. No managing everyone else's lives. The irony nearly made me laugh. When we entered her room, Mom looked fragile for the first time in my entire life. No makeup. No posture. No control. Just a tired woman staring at ceiling tiles. She looked at me quietly. You came. 3 simple words. But they sounded genuinely surprised. Of course I came. Mom swallowed hard. Then she whispered something I never expected to hear. I thought you were angry. I pulled a chair beside her bed. I was. Past tense. Not because the pain vanished. Because clarity had replaced confusion. Mom looked smaller somehow. I did what I thought was practical. I know. I was trying to protect the family. No, I said softly. You were trying to protect the system. Tears filled her eyes immediately. That shocked me more than the hospital call. My mother never cried. Not at funerals. Not at weddings. Not during arguments. But now tears slid silently across her face. I didn't know there was a difference. The room became very quiet. Dad looked down. Vanessa stared at the floor. And suddenly I saw it clearly. None of us knew how to be a family. We only knew how to perform functions. Mom managed. Dad avoided. Vanessa consumed. I stabilized. That was our entire architecture. No wonder it collapsed under pressure. Mom looked at me carefully. Were we really that bad? I could have destroyed her in that moment. Listed every wound. Every humiliation. Every conditional interaction. Instead, I asked something simpler. When Ethan's company failed, why didn't you ask if I was okay? Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. Finally, she whispered, because I thought solving the problem mattered more. There it was. The family religion. Efficiency above intimacy. Function above feeling. Management above love. I nodded slowly. That's the problem. Nobody spoke after that. Machines beeped softly nearby. Hospital wheels rolled down distant halls. Eventually, Mom looked at me again. I rented your room because I panicked. I almost smiled sadly. You called it an used capacity. A tear slid down her cheek. I know. You uninvited me from family events. I thought people would judge you. No, I said gently. You thought people would judge you. That one hit. I saw it immediately. Mom spent her entire life organizing appearances because she believed chaos made people unlovable. And she passed that fear on to all of us differently. Dad learned silence. Vanessa learned dependence. I learned usefulness. But fear built every wall in that family. Not hate. Fear. The doctor returned briefly and asked everyone except immediate family to leave. Vanessa stood awkwardly. I'll get coffee. Dad followed her quietly. Then it was just me and Mom. She stared at the ceiling. I don't know how to fix this. For once, neither did I. And somehow that honesty felt healthier than every polished conversation we'd ever had. So instead of offering solutions, I offered truth. You may not be able to. She looked at me slowly. I continued carefully. I love you, but I'm not doing this anymore. What does that mean? No more being valuable only when I'm useful. Her face crumpled slightly. That's not what you were. It became what I was.
She tried to speak.
I raised my hand gently. Mom, my life collapsed and everyone treated me like expired inventory. Fresh tears filled her eyes. I didn't realize. I know. And, strangely, I believed her. That didn't erase the damage, but it changed the shape of it. Because monsters are easier to hate than broken people. And my family wasn't evil. Just emotionally illiterate. Mom reached for my hand carefully. Will you come back home after this? The old me would have said yes instantly. The new me understood something important. Love without boundaries becomes employment. So I squeezed her hand gently and answered honestly. I'll visit. Her eyes closed slowly. And, for the first time in my life, I chose myself without apologizing for it. 3 months later, Ethan found a new position with a software firm in Seattle. Not glamorous. Not millionaire money. Just stable.
Real. Healthy.
We sold the condo before foreclosure touched it. We downsized dramatically. Smaller apartment. Fewer expenses. Less performance. More peace. Mom started therapy after the hospital incident. Dad began calling me directly every Sunday morning. At first the conversations felt awkward. Then gradually,
real.
Vanessa still struggled most. She didn't know how to interact without transactions attached. But sometimes healing begins with discomfort. And boundaries make honest relationships possible. The strange thing is, my family didn't collapse after I stopped carrying everyone. They adapted. Systems always do. The difference is this time. I was no longer functioning as unpaid infrastructure pretending it was love. Last winter I visited my parents for Christmas. The Airbnb listing was gone. My old bedroom looked different. Simpler. Cleaner. But mine again. Mom stood awkwardly in the doorway holding a storage box. I found these. Inside were my childhood drawings. Dad's birdhouse sketches. Letters. Tiny forgotten pieces of myself. Mom looked nervous. I thought you might want them back. Not organized. Not categorized. Not archived. Just returned. I took the box carefully. And for the first time in years, the gesture felt personal instead of procedural. Healing isn't cinematic. Nobody gave speeches. Nobody transformed overnight. There was no magical reconciliation dinner with violins playing softly in the background. Just smaller moments. Healthier ones. Real ones. And honestly, that mattered more. Because family should never feel like employment. Love should not disappear the second your productivity does. And if people only notice you when you're providing something, they were attached to your function, not your humanity. It took losing everything for me to understand that. But once I did, I finally stopped auditioning for a role I was never meant to play. And that was the first truly stable foundation I ever built.